Week 5 has already gotten underway. There's been a couple of trades this week. Randy Gregory going to San Francisco, linebacker from Denver. And then we have Chase Claypool getting traded to Miami from Chicago. And to me, I think maybe they're just going to use Chase Claypool if they find him usable as like a big tight end, receiving tight end kind of guy. In the offseason, they converted, I can't remember who it was now, a wide receiver to tight end for some period of time. I don't know if he's still with them. So yeah, week 5 is well and underway, and changes are happening with teams, and the changes never stop, especially all of the injuries. So we will have the injury report in this video. I will give you my DFS lineup of the week, quick recap of how I did last week at the end of the video, not even towards it, right before we end the video. And before we get started, one big thing from the Thursday night game. We saw Chicago pretty much whoop up on Washington. We saw Washington come back, but just was not a very inspired game by Washington, and Chicago was playing to the opposite end of the spectrum. Like they wanted to prove some people wrong, and like they wanted to win. And so, and one of their strengths is definitely one of Washington's defense's weaknesses, which was that deep ball, which was something that I pointed out through the week. So, as far as how this game went, though, still, nobody really saw this game flow coming. I'm not fully going to be buying into much from either side of this game. I will gloat a little bit about my preseason take on Logan Thomas. Had quite a bit of love for him really early on in the preseason, and then didn't even know if he was going to be healthy to start the season, so I kind of cooled off on that. But I think it's because of the system that he's a big part of it. He also works a good area of the field whereas Sam Howell's strength is as a passer down kind of the middle of the field. So I do think that this is a thing to buy into for season long. While Logan Thomas has been healthy this season so far, he's been one of the best fantasy tight ends. So I do expect that to pretty much continue as long as he can stay healthy. I know it wasn't for long, but hopefully you just caught my quarterback rankings. I will show the updated rankings for different positions as the video goes along. Wide receivers, by the way, will start at my wide receiver 9. So if there's an obvious wide receiver that you think is missing, they're probably in my top 8 and are must starts. So that way you can just see a little bit lower further down on the list. But you can find all of my rankings up on the website at www.theffforge.com. Just cold opened that, by the way. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and once again, www.theffforge.com. Link down in the description there for my live updated rankings. You can also see my projections to give you an expected range, and I also have floors and ceilings for all the players. Now, let's go through this, starting off with the Baltimore Ravens. We have OBJ with a questionable tag on him due to his ankle. He is expected to be playing this week. Rashad Bateman is back, and Justice Hill is questionable with a hamstring/foot injury. I'm not sure what the odds are of him playing or not, but if not, all the better for Gus Edwards if you wanted to give him a go. As you can see, have him down there as running back 26, and that really is expecting Justice Hill to be playing. I think if Justice Hill's not a go, I would think about Gus Edwards as high as like running back 21 there, depending on what happens with Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, exactly. So ahead of some of those guys who don't like the matchups, don't like the upsides for, we'll say for Carolina, Miles Sanders, because of this Detroit offense, which we will get to shortly, being a little bit ravaged potentially this week, maybe that gives you a little bit of hope for the Carolina offense as a whole, but the Detroit run defense is the part of the defense that is still healthy, and so as far as Miles Sanders go, not too excited about that. Moving on to Cincinnati, T. Higgins is questionable with a ribs injury, and as far as I can gather, it really just comes down to a pain tolerance issue for him. I don't know what the likelihood of him playing is or not, but I am currently ranking him as if he is playing. So I moved Tyler Boyd down from a low-end wide receiver to a low-end wide receiver 4 from a wide receiver 3. And then I moved, I didn't do anything with Chase, and T. Higgins I have as a borderline wide receiver 2/wide receiver 3, one spot ahead of Deebo Samuel and one spot behind Gabe Davis to give you an idea of where I have him. And for the Denver Broncos, Javonte Williams did not participate, limited practice twice, so I don't have the final injury report in for Denver as of the moment, but he did come out and say that he thinks that he'll be questionable all week. We have been aware of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is doubtful now with his oblique injury, so that is a different injury than he had previously. He still has the toe injury, but this oblique appears to be somewhat serious. Like I said, doubtful, so I took Amon-Ra St. Brown out of my rankings, and unfortunately, the only two wide receivers that you might even think about playing are questionable, so keep an eye on these two. That would be Josh Reynolds and Jameson Williams. So Josh Reynolds is now a wide receiver 3 for me. Didn't quite have him ranked that highly, but I'd say he's probably their wide receiver 1 this week. Then I also moved Jameson Williams up a little bit, but I still have him a ways out of starting territory. I have him at wide receiver 58, which is right behind OBJ. I already had Sam Laporta as a must-start tight end 4. I think if anybody's going to get the most upgrade from this, it's going to be him, and I can't move him up any further from tight end 4. If I said wide receiver, my mistake. Tight end for Sam Laporta. And then Jahmyr Gibbs. But, I will say, if you happen to be stacked at tight end, this is a scenario where if you have 2 of those top 4 guys, if you have Sam Laporta, I don't hate him as a flex starter this week, depending on what your roster looks like. So I do have Jahmyr Gibbs as a questionable tag on him with a hamstring injury, which popped up just yesterday or today for me on Friday. That's never a good thing, and hamstring injuries are never a good thing. So I'm not really expecting him to be playing, and I think that he would have been the biggest benefactor of an Amon-Ra St. Brown absence, given where he works the field, and he might have just basically been working as their slot receiver. So I am not ranking him anymore, have him out of my rankings if you look over there, and I already had David Montgomery as one of my 5th ranked running backs, so I really can't be moving him up any further than I already have him, but even more confidence in him if you were questioning it at all. The other thing to keep in mind is that Carolina doesn't give up a whole lot of fantasy points to receivers anyways, so I just... These Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, they're not can't miss guys this week, regardless of if they're a go or not. And now we have the wide receiver rankings showing over there. Moving on to just a quick note on Green Bay Packers. David Bakhtiari is out for the season. He's going to have to undergo another surgery, unfortunately. So the never-ending saga of David Bakhtiari's injury continues, unfortunately, for him. And unfortunately for the Packers, that is definitely a blow. They're pretty deep on the offensive line, but regardless, that's always going to be a blow to any offensive line, not having David in there. Then on to Houston. John Mechie is questionable with an illness. Just popped up on Friday, I believe. Usually illnesses don't hold guys out of games, but sometimes they do. Indianapolis, no decision on Jonathan Taylor yet. He is listed as questionable, however, and I'm not overly excited to get either of those 2 running backs, being Taylor or Moss, into my lineup, regardless of who is or is not starting. Tennessee is stout against the run. If Jonathan Taylor plays, he's a low-end RB2 for me. You can see, you could have seen where I had him ranked. And Zach Moss would be ranked somewhere around where Zeke Elliott gets ranked if Jonathan Taylor's playing, and that's really only based on the assumption that if JT is going, Zach Moss is still going to be worked in this week. I don't think that JT is going to get a full workload this week. Then Jacksonville, Zay Jones is questionable. I'm ranking him as if he is playing, so I pulled back on Evan Ingram, all the receiving options for Jacksonville, just out of caution that one of them is going to be a bust, and I just don't know who. Could be Zay Jones himself, but just gets me a little bit concerned about all the other targets there. Then Las Vegas, and they're going up against Kansas City this week, so a little bit of a tough matchup. Las Vegas plays on Monday Night Football, but right before recording, Jimmy Garoppolo was determined as good to go. He has passed his concussion protocols. And for the Los Angeles Rams, Kyren Williams did not practice, limited practice, minor hip bruise. I think he's expected to be playing, so that is why I moved on without getting a Rams report. And we also know that Cooper Kupp will be activated, and he is expected to make his first start of this season this weekend. I've had him ranked as a must-start wide receiver all week. He is in my top 8. He is supposed to be a full go, essentially. The coach, Sean McVay, said no specific limitations are going to be had on him. And one note for the Los Angeles Rams in that passing game, Eagles' Fletcher Cox will be out for this game, and that goes really, he's a stud as far as putting pressure on quarterbacks like like a mile ahead of everybody else in the NFL kind of stud. So that's huge. That's also good for Matt Stafford, who I have moved up in my rankings. New Orleans, if you can go back to the beginning of the video to see that, or go up onto the website. New Orleans, Juwan Johnson out. Derek Carr, questionable with the shoulder. Derek Carr played last week with this shoulder thing, so I think he's a go. And Saquon Barkley has the ankle. It's questionable. We know that he's going to be pushing to play. I don't think he should play this week. So here's the thing. The New York Giants are down 3/5 of their starting offensive line. Maybe even 4/5, I think, but 3/5 compared to where they started at last week. At center, this should be an actual upgrade for them in the passing game, but it is a downgrade for them in the rushing game. At guard, this could be an upgrade in the passing game, a mute point for the rushing game. This is based on PFF grading. And it's a definite downgrade from Andrew Thomas to Joshua Izzuto in all aspects. So the offensive line's banged up, and if anything, it might have helped the passing game, but it's not going to help Saquon Barkley, who I think is going to be gimped in this game. This has no real effect on the ranking for me for Daniel Jones. The receivers aren't really startable anyways, but this does bring more concern to Saquon Barkley beyond him potentially being all gimped and coming back from an injury too early. Initially, I thought I'm basically going to be starting Saquon regardless of any of those concerns and just put him out there. He's a really, really good running back, and they're going to have to rely on him. But being reminded of the state of this already poor offensive line did end up having me push him back a few spots in my rankings, push him back from running back 13 to running back 16. And I'm fine if you wish to sit him. This is just kind of me giving you a heads up on the state of that O-line and where I think the health of Saquon Barkley is going to be if he plays. So there you go. And the tight end rankings are over there too as we wrap up this video. Pittsburgh, Pat Freiermuth is out, Elijah Mitchell out, and Treylon Burks out. That doesn't really change anything for the rankings. Those were all either expected or, Christian McCaffrey can't be higher than the running back 1 with Elijah Mitchell out, but I guess start him with confidence. Let's move on to my DFS lineups. And last week gave you a big tournament play here. I had the right idea by spending up for Christian McCaffrey. He was well worth it. I think a lot of winning lineups had Christian McCaffrey in them. Unfortunately, the supporting cast that I put around him sucked. So my lineup did not end up doing too well despite having Christian McCaffrey in it. So this week I'm going along a similar path. I looked at the quarterbacks this week, and I said in my quarterback rankings video that I felt it was probably worth spending up for Patrick Mahomes. And I still think that after doing my lineup here. So I do have quarterback Patrick Mahomes at $8,200 in my lineup here. Then I have running back Joe Mixon at $6,400 and Breece Hall at $5,400. I tinkered around with this quite a bit. There's a lot of things that I could still do even with paying up for Patrick Mahomes. Just a heads up. So then for my wide receivers, I have Justin Jefferson in at $9,400. So I spent up on another guy here. I like the matchup there going up against I wanted to say Miami. That feels wrong. It's Kansas City. As far as a high upside, a little bit concerned that maybe this could be a game where he gets shut down against that KC defense, but thinking more it's a back and forth game, and Justin Jefferson should be a big part of that. Then wide receiver Jalen Waddle at $7,500, and to pair up with Patrick Mahomes, I went and I got myself Rashee Rice at $3,600. Then at tight end, I was able to only spend $3,500 on Zach Ertz. My love him for the tight end position. And for my flex position, I spent $3K at the bottom of the barrel here on Wan'Dale Robinson. So that's where I was able to save some money between that and my defense, and was able to go up at for Justin Jefferson's, keep Jalen Waddle, and then I moved a running back. I went from James Conner up to Joe Mixon with a couple of tweaks here and there, most namely that Wan'Dale Robinson move. And so my DST to wrap up my lineup is going to be the New Orleans Saints at $3K. I had to they were the best defense that I could afford, and I think they have a chance against New England of doing something. Mac Jones has thrown quite a few pick-worthy passes, so hopefully that'll come through. There's the lineup. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, Rashee Rice, Wan'Dale Robinson at tight end, Zach Ertz, and the New Orleans Saints. Thank you so much for tuning on in, and visit me a half hour prior to the morning game, so about 8:30 Eastern time, or 1 hour prior to kickoff on the main slate of games. for your start sit questions, of course, is why you would be visiting me here live on YouTube. Peace out.